person.
Good night, madam. Will there be anything else, Mr. Apley?
No, thank you, Wilson. 10 o'clock. Sunday evening supper for the entire family was a traditional meal when my father was alive. Now, my own children deliberately choose to ignore it.
There are many more activities for young people outside the home nowadays.
Activities? No activity should conflict with the sanctity of long-established custom.
I'm sure the children don't mean to be irreverent, George.
That's not the point, Catherine. In my father's day... Is that you, Eleanor? Oh, it's you, John. And what activity have you been up to?
Activity? Oh, I've been grinding up on a little French, Father. You know, idioms and irregular verbs.
That makes 3 out of the last 4 evenings you spent on your studies.
Well, I've got to get up early, Father. Good night, Mother.
Good night, dear.
Good night, Father.
Good night, John. Violet perfume. Cheap violet perfume. It's this letter. It reeks. Addressed to John in a woman's handwriting in purple ink. Mr. John Apley. A-P-L-Y. She can't even spell.
What is it?
Myrtle Dole. Myrtle Dole. And she lives in Worcester. Girl's foreigner. French irregular verbs indeed. John?
Oh, George, please don't...
Excuse me, my dear. John?
Yes, Father.
I found this letter. I smelled it. It throws an interesting light on the long evenings you've been spending on your studies. You have some obligations, John, as a gentleman, as an heir to the best traditions of Boston, as an Apley. You owe it to yourself and to me to choose proper companions. My cousin, Peter, your second cousin, once removed, had just such an unfortunate affair. He married someone named Gwendolyn Hoop and had to move to California, to some place with a Spanish name. John, I forbid you categorically to go on seeing this young person.
Father, this isn't fair.
Good night, John. When you thought this over calmly, you will realize that I am right. Dole, indeed.
What did you say, dear?
I said dole, and it is the last time I expect to say it or hear it. When do you suppose Eleanor will come in?
Whenever the discussion group breaks up, I expect.
Discussion group?
Now, George, don't pretend that you don't know all about it. It's at Mr. Boulder's. He lectures at Harvard.
What can this Boulder person and his group have to discuss that can possibly interest Eleanor?
Sex. Now, that's what Dr. Freud says, and that is what he means. If you reject this, you reject his whole theory of psychoanalysis.
Oh, Eleanor, of course I accept psychoanalysis, but I must say it's a little embarrassing to find that everything I dream about is... Well, really, what I mean is... Well, if you know what I mean.
You mean sex, Ethel. Now, you can't close your eyes to it. It won't go away.
You should read Freud's new book, Ethel. I think it would clear things up for you.
I want to print a review of it in the Crimson. And you're the one to write it, Howard. I'll give you a full page.
No, I'm not the one to write it. If you want a faculty member, I think you'd better get a psychologist, not a lecturer on English. It's rather strong stuff for the Harvard Crimson to print, isn't it?
I'd like to see anybody try to tell me what to print.
Why, I think Freud ought to be required reading. He explains practically everything about people.
Everything? Well, one thing he doesn't explain is why a given man and a given woman sensed that they were made for each other.
But that's not important.
It's pretty important to this given man and his given woman.
Goodness, I had no idea how late it was.
I thought you were a modern emancipated woman. What do you care how late it is?
I'm not emancipated from the last trolley to Wellesley.
All right, I'll take you home.
Thank you. 8
o'clock. So early.
I didn't give you permission to leave. Good night. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Good night, Ethel.
Well, good night, Howard. Thanks for everything.
Night, Brad.
Bye.
Bye. Remember next week. I'm very proud of you, Eleanor. You're really quite eloquent this evening.
I'm afraid I amazed poor Ethel.
Oh, she loved it. Oh, I'm the one that's still amazed.
With what?
It's you, Apley of Beacon Street, being happy with a boulder of Greenwich Village. A month ago, I would have said it was impossible.
Well, we live in a wonderful world.
You know, you pop into my mind at the most unexpected moments. When I'm lecturing, when I'm shaving, right in the middle of lunch. I'm fast becoming the absent-minded professor. Have you ever been kissed by an absent-minded professor?
What about the new book?
Oh, yes. Freud. First time in English.
Well, I guess you'd better take me home now.
No, I can't let you go right away.
Oh, but
Let's have dinner together, and then we'll take a walk, and then...
if we do all that, I'll be awfully late.
If we don't, I'll be awfully lonely.
All right.
Come back again real soon. Good night.
Good night.
This is a wonderful place. It's so different from an evening at home with the Apleys. You know, you really ought to meet Father. Why don't you come and have Thanksgiving dinner with us?
Well, I do want to meet your father very much, but Thanksgiving dinner, well, I wouldn't want to spoil the family atmosphere.
Oh, you could only improve it. You know, Father thinks that the sun rises at one end of Beacon Street and sets at the other, and he'd prefer that I know no one from the outer darkness.
Oh, it's mighty dark out where I come from.
Oh, no. That's why I want you to come and shed a little light. You will, won't you?
When duty whispers low, thou must, the youth replies, I can. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
That's wonderful. You'll get along beautifully with Father. He quotes Emerson from morning until night.
I'll bring along a complete set of quotations.
Good. Then that's settled. You know something?
What?
I've been thinking. It would be very pleasant if my family liked you. But it won't really matter if they don't. Because after all, it's my life. Or rather, it's yours and mine.
I know a very beautiful poem. You want to hear it?
Mm-hmm.
It goes something like this. To have and to hold from this day forward. For better, for worse. For richer, for poorer. In sickness and in health. To love and to cherish till death do us part.
Eleanor, do you know what time it is?
No, Father, but I'm sure it's quite late.
You must have taken leave of your senses.
I have never been so completely aware of my senses my whole life.
I don't know what that means, but I do know that it is my duty to keep my daughter from cheapening herself, to safeguard her from unsuitable young men.
Stop it, Father. In the first place, I'm not cheapening myself. In the second place, if a young man suits me, he's suitable.
Eleanor!
Dear, Howard Boulder is an interesting man. He's a brilliant man. But apparently he doesn't belong to what you call the right people.
You never spoke to me in this intolerable manner till you came under his influence. Such disrespect.
No, Father, it's not disrespect for you. It's disrespect for the rules and standards that make you call Howard Boulder unsuitable when you don't know anything about him. Good night.
There are some of us who think it's our duty to defend our traditions against bohemians.
Is anyone who disagrees with you a bohemian?
I do not wish you to see this Boulder again.
Perhaps you are being a little hasty, George.
I'm never hasty.
I was thinking that we might invite Mr. Boulder to dinner. Then we'd all
We
have
will
a
do
talk.
nothing of the sort.
I already have invited him to Thanksgiving dinner.
Indeed. And you will uninvite him.
George, I very rarely go against your wishes. But I do think that this time Ellen is justified in asking that you at least meet Mr. Boulder.
Why should I?
Because he's none of the things that you say he is.
You must be fair, George.
I am always fair-minded. If you insist that I meet Mr. Boulder,
Thank you, Father. And I apologize for some of the things I said to you.
there's no need to apologize. I know you didn't mean them. You couldn't. On these occasions, I always think of one of Emerson's best epigrams. The ornament of a house is the friends who frequent it. Here, here. Master John Wilson.
Uncle Roger, the letters are 10 feet high, red and white, flashing off and on, above the level of the trees.
What on earth are you babbling about, John?
The new electrical sign over the common, Father. They start work on it Monday.
An electrical sign flashing on and off over the common? You must be mistaken, John.
Oh, they were talking about it at the club today. That's true enough.
And what will it say?
Cape Codfish.
Cape Codfish.
Well, we shall have to put a stop to that. I'll have Roger see the mayor and give him a piece of his mind.
Piece of your mind, my dear.
So you're teaching at Harvard, Mr. Boulder. What was your class?
Oh, I'm not a Harvard man, Mr. Apley. I took my Ph.D. at Yale.
Yale.
Extraordinary.
I took my bachelor's degree at Lehigh. Worked my way through, as a waiter mostly.
Really? A waiter? Well, very laudable, I'm sure. Lehigh, eh?
Lehigh, that's in a valley somewhere, is it not?
You're thinking of a railroad, my dear, or a song.
Mother, do you think I really have to go to Cousin Priscilla's coming out party?
Your Aunt Maud would be terribly hurt if you didn't, dear.
I never heard of such a thing. An Apley staying away from an Apley occasion.
Coming out parties are barbarous.
They're what?
Relics of barbarism. Coming out parties are nothing but the prehistoric ceremony of presenting the virgin to the tribe.
Really, Eleanor, there are some things we do not discuss.
Why not? Why shouldn't we face facts?
Well, we're not going to face virginity in the dining room over Thanksgiving dinner. That is final.
I must remember that, Mr. Boulder. A specialist is one who knows more and more about less and less. That's very good.
Thank you.
Your Mr. Boulder is much too modest, Eleanor. There's nothing I admire in a man as much as wit.
Oh, that's news to me, Amelia. I thought I'd been unappreciated all these years.
Oh, Roger. Have a cigar.
Not just now, thanks.
You know, it's just occurred to me that since Dr. Beach died, the Boston Waifs have no president. Been a member of the Boston Waifs for 20 years.
The Boston Waifs, you know, George, if you don't think that you're undertaking too much, you're the logical candidate for the presidency.
Of course, I don't want to push myself, but I was just wondering if you, quite quietly, you know, could sound out some of the leading members.
I'd be glad to, George. There's nothing I like palace intrigue.
Oh, yes, Mrs.
Excuse me, Mother, I'm late.
Are you going, John?
Yes, I probably won't be in for supper, Mother. Goodbye, Aunt Amelia.
Where are you going, John?
I have to study, Father. You know, make up some time I lost.
Irregular French verbs on Thanksgiving afternoon?
And other subjects, a term exam. I probably will be working all through the weekend, day and night. Bye.
Goodbye, John.
Bye, John.
John has been acting very strangely the past week or two. I wonder.
Oh, well. Anyone who's read Freud knows that adolescence is a very critical period.
Anybody who's read what?
Freud, Father, is a great psychoanalyst in Vienna.
Freud's the most important influence on human thought since the 18th century.
Did you know you had an unconscious mind, Father?
That is not true, Eleanor.
Oh, it's not a thing the individual is able to control, sir. Repressed desires and mysterious urges rule the unconscious mind.
It sounds extremely vulgar to me.
A man might get a bargain when he offers a penny for your thoughts. Eh, Mr. Boulder?
Freud's proved rather conclusively that the one basic human drive is sex.
Boulder, there are ladies present.
And gentlemen.
Well, it's the same in both sexes. You see, Freud makes no distinction.
Aunt Amelia, that's a lovely dress. It's new, isn't it?
Quite new.
Father, what was it Emerson said about the well-dressed woman?
I don't recall.
Well, Howard's familiar with Emerson, aren't you, Howard?
Oh, yes. The sense of being well-dressed gives a woman a feeling of inward tranquility.
There. You see, Father, Howard knows Emerson almost as well as you do.
Why? Oh, I have to, sir. My lectures would be quite inadequate without good old Emerson to fortify them.
Good old Emerson. Then your subject is American literature.
Yes, sir. Under the Jonathan Smythe Fellowship.
The Jonathan Smythe. Bless my soul. You know the Jonathan Smythe, Roger. Buzzy Loring's the trustee.
Bound to be. Anything you're not trustee of, Buzzy Loring is.
Well, I think I'd like to attend one of your lectures. What's the subject of the next one?
It's about Emerson, Thoreau, and Hawthorne. I call them the conquered radicals.
I beg your pardon. Did you say radicals?
Oh, yes, sir. In their day, they were the...
In their day, you contend that Ralph Waldo Emerson was a radical.
Well, they all were. Well, the best people had very little use for Emerson. Yet now they revere him as a saint. That's exactly the point of my lecture. That yesterday's radical is today's stuffed shirt.
And you express these sentiments under official sanction in Emerson Hall.
I say what I think.
Ellie, dear, why don't you take Mr. Boulder to the conservatory and show him the camellias?
Yes, Howard, you must see them. There are some red and white striped ones that are called Camille.
Have your camellias come out yet, Amelia?
A very dangerous young man.
I'm going to have a chat with Buzzy Loring. I'll find out if he knows what kind of a lecturer the Jonathan Smythe is sponsoring. A waiter from Lehigh.
Memory plays some strange tricks. Thoreau, for instance, is remembered as a gentle, natural philosopher, but forgotten as the gentle, natural anarchist who said, "Government is but an expedient. That government is best which governs not at all." Emerson today is the darling of the conservatives, when actually in his own day, he was a rebel.
You see, Buzzy,
Don't forget,
wasn't
it was Emerson
exaggerating.
who said, "Who would be a man must be a nonconformist." And it was Emerson who said, "Nothing is sacred but the integrity of your own mind." Yet today, he is a sacred cow in the arid pastures of the past, such as Boston. What constitutes radicalism, of course, depends upon a time element. Yesterday's radical is today's stuffed shirt.
But Howard, they can't. How can Harvard just fire you without...
Harvard has nothing to do with it. Under the terms of the fellowship, all Buzzy Loring has to do is withdraw his approval of me, which he did. I saw him and your father at my lecture yesterday.
Father? Do you think that Father had...
Don't you? Oh, I should have known better than to come here in the first place. That I'd be a fish out of water. Well, I'd better start packing.
Packing? Are you going to quit? You're just going to allow yourself to be run out of town by a couple of snobs?
Led by your father.
Father, yes. That's who we've got to fight. If Father wants to throw away the rules, we'll show him who can kick and bite and scratch.
We'll start it in the Crimson, but it's got to be big. A national issue. Front pages all over the country. Academic freedom. Integrity of our colleges. Boston snobbery. Mass meetings. Protests from coast to coast. Undergraduate strikes. One man's personal spite. Wow. You're sure you want to do this? Your father's...
Don't worry, he deserves it.
All right.
Come in. Oh, John.
Wilson said you want to see me, Father.
Charlton, the florist, rang up on the telephone this morning. He said they were out of the tea roses that we had ordered for Miss Myrtle Dole and asked what he could send instead. I canceled the order.
But, Father, those
I
roses were...
expressly forbade you to see this young woman, John.
Father, you don't know the first thing about the Doles.
Ah, but I do. I've looked them up. I know that Mr. Dole is in commerce. I know that you write his daughter every day, deluge her with flowers, which evidently you charge to me.
Take them out of my allowance.
Quiet, sir. I know that the Doles live in a large frame house in Worcester, that there's an iron deer on the front lawn. An iron deer. That should have given you cause to reflect. You will drop this young woman now, John. Is that clear?
Father, please.
You may go now, that is all. Something, sir? Helena, will you come in, please?
Yes, Father.
You left this book in the sitting room, where your mother or John or even one of the servants might have picked it up.
Well, I hadn't thought what reading Freud might do to the household. Poor Wilson.
The man is clearly unbalanced. Must have spent his whole life thinking of nothing but...
Oh, Father, he's demonstrated that the one basic human urge is sex.
Eleanor, you might show some delicacy.
Father, we're getting away from all the old taboos. We say what we think.
I take it by we, you mean yourself, Mr. Boulder, and Dr. Freud. I have never read anything so shocking. Case histories. Perhaps life is different in Middle Europe. I'm sure none of this obscene rubbish is true of the people of Boston. All this talk of repressed desires, and such desires.
Father, I brought you the transcript.
Thank you. Put it down somewhere.
Did you know that there's a big story about you and Howard Boulder right on the front page? Students see malice in lecturer's dismissal. Say Apley had private motive for action against Boulder.
You mean that is in the transcript?
Oh, it's in all the papers.
Let me see that. Today's Harvard Crimson stated that Dr. Boulder has for some time been a close friend of Miss Eleanor Apley. Disgraceful, dragging your name to it. How dare they? It's criminal libel. If it weren't beneath my dignity to go through the courts.
It's very close to the truth, Father.
It is nothing of the sort. We acted entirely on the basis of his lectures. Eleanor, I should hate to think it was you that gave this information to the newspapers.
Lots of people knew about Howard and me. It was bound to come out.
You mean you're still seeing him?
Of course.
As a matter of simple loyalty to your father, Eleanor, I do not wish you to see Mr. Boulder again, especially in view of this.
Well, I'm terribly sorry, Father. But I intend to go on seeing him. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting him for lunch right now. Good day.
Mr. Apley, sir.
Morning, Charles. Is Mr. Newcomb in the club?
Yes, they came in a few minutes ago. Mr. Apley, I'm from the Globe.
Berkeley Associated Press, Mr. Apley. We'd like a statement from you, sir, on the Harvard Crimson story about you and Miss Apley and Dr. Boulder.
Well, the whole thing is preposterous.
What are you denying, Mr. Apley? That Dr. Boulder was friendly with Miss Apley? That Dr. Boulder had Thanksgiving dinner at your home? Or that you acted from personal malice?
I acted from a sense of duty. Harvard undergraduates are very easily influenced. Ready prey for a smooth-talking radical. They must be protected from dangerous points of view.
And your daughter, Mr. Apley, were you protecting her in the same way when you arranged to have Dr. Boulder dismissed?
If you put it that way, I have obligations as a parent. I have nothing more to say.
Thank you, Mr. Apley. Thank you very much.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry I'm late, Roger.
There's really no hurry. George, the executive committee of the Boston Waifs has canceled the luncheon.
What about the presidency?
Every last one begged off. I never heard such a variety of excuses.
I don't understand.
I do, George. You got to stop acting like a blasted idiot.
Nobody's called me a blasted idiot since Father died.
It's this Boulder business.
I did what was right. I acted from the dictates of my own conscience.
I doubt whether the society are concerned whether you were right or wrong. What they don't like is the notoriety.
I feel as if I were being persecuted.
Let's go to the bar. I suggest a martini cocktail.
I never touch spirits before luncheon. Under ordinary circumstances, that is.
Are the bigots of Beacon Hill to tell men of Harvard what and how to think? What book to read, or what play to see, or what lecturer to hear? No! One of the leaders of this group, Mr. George Apley, has made a statement to the newspapers. I'd like to read some of it to you. He says, Harvard undergraduates are very easily influenced. Ready prey for a smooth-talking radical. I guess that means me. He goes on to say, it is our duty to protect them from dangerous points of view. Now, presumably, Mr. Apley intends to set himself up as a head of a committee to pass on points of view, in which case, I suggest that every Harvard man be compelled to wear a pair of soundproof earmuffs. And undergraduates not be allowed to take them off without permission from Mr. Apley's committee. Now, you see, I'm perfectly safe. I can't hear a word I'm saying. I know your feet hurt, but after all, let's give the old college try.
Mr. Julian Doe to see you, sir.
Mr. Doe? Oh. Show him in.
Mr. Doe? Hope you'll excuse me for calling without an appointment, Mr. Apley. Happened to be in the neighborhood, and I thought you and I ought to have a little talk.
I see. Won't you sit down?
Thank you. Well, shall we get right to the point? You have a son, I have a daughter. It seems they met at a football game. Seems they think they're in love with each other.
I hope you won't misunderstand. My son is very young.
So is my daughter, Mr. Apley. I told Myrtle there are plenty of boys in Worcester, and I wanted to stop seeing Johnny.
You told her?
Mind you, I have nothing against Johnny and his place. But his place isn't my house or Worcester. Now, he's a nice lad, and I don't want to hurt his feelings. I thought you might tell him to stop seeing Myrtle.
You feel that John...
I don't want you to think this has anything to do with all these newspaper stories about you, Mr. Apley. Not directly, anyway.
The newspapers are being utterly ridiculous.
Pretty interesting reading. When a fellow like you can just tip another fellow the wink and toss a professor out on his ear. Had a little daughter trouble yourself, eh?
You believe all you see in the newspapers?
Well, it's not important, except, as you might say, a symptom. Because Johnny's a dead ringer for you, Mr. Apley. When he's your age, he'll be the same man.
I like to think so.
So you can see he's not the husband for Myrtle. John wouldn't know how to take Worcester, even if Worcester could find out how to take him.
Apparently, that will never be necessary.
I agree. A dole's no more of a catch for an Apley than an Apley is for a dole.
I suppose that is true.
Well, that's what I came to say. Glad we see eye to eye about the kids.
Goodbye, Mr. Dole.
Have you read those placards? Kind of amusing.
I have not. I have sent for the police. They should have been here before this.
Well, good luck, Mr. Apley.
that man, George?
Mr. Julian Dole of Worcester, father of Miss Myrtle Dole.
Oh, dear. That name you never wanted to hear again.
Came to ask that I forbid John to see his daughter again.
He doesn't want John. Well...
But there's a silver lining. He assures me that a Dole is no more of a catch for an Apley than an Apley is for a Dole. I don't know what the world's coming to. Electrical signs flashing over the common, pickets on Beacon Street, my own daughter infatuated with a man who was probably an anarchist. The Boston waifs avoiding me because of my notoriety. This fella Dole's chief objection to John is that he's too much like me. Our values are disintegrating before our eyes, Catherine. The police should have been here half an hour ago. Let them continue their agitation. Nobody is going to reinstate Boulder.
Thanks. Thanks for trying to help me. But it isn't important whether or not I'm reinstated. The important thing is that you fellas continue the fight even though I'm not here to lead you.
I know. We'll picket Emerson Hall. And I'd like to see the police try to run us off the campus the way they ran us off Beacon Street. We'll get together in the morning and plan a campaign with a strong slogan.
Like what?
Men of Harvard, unite. We have nothing to lose but our Apleys.
Thank you very much, Bradford. So long, fellas. Thanks again. So long, Brad.
Bye, Howard.
Here's one Apley I don't intend to lose. Darling, will you marry me now, today? Just as soon as I can find a justice of the peace.
Today?
This whole thing started because of us. By marrying me, we can prove to your father that he hasn't beaten us.
Well, I don't think that's such a good reason for getting married.
It's a good reason for expediting something I was determined to do since the first moment I met you. Will you?
All right. The minute you can find a justice of the peace.
I love you.
I love you. Father?
Come in.
Father, I want to talk to you. I made up my mind to tell you...
This is a coincidence. I want to talk to you. I've made up my mind, too. Sit down, Eleanor.
No, thank you.
Tell me, are Mr. Boulder and his friends conducting this absurd campaign out of spite, or do they actually believe that Harvard College, or Mr. Loring, or I, can be influenced by their childish tactics?
Oh, Father, they're not childish.
Picketing is the latest weapon of the radicals. Let me tell you this. No amount of persecution will have the slightest effect on me.
I know that.
Very well. It is true that you have a legal right to lead your own life. But as long as you live in this house, as long as you bear the name of Apley, you are subject to my parental guidance. I must insist once and for all that you give up Mr. Boulder and begin to behave like a young lady again.
Now, may I say what I came to tell you?
Certainly.
Howard Boulder has asked me to marry him, Father.
Ridiculous. You haven't accepted...
I came to tell you that I'm going to marry him because I love him.
Ellen.
So you see, I won't be living in this house, nor bearing the name of Apley. I wish I could have done this with your understanding and consent and your blessing. But you seem to have made that impossible even to hope for. I'm very sorry.
Where are you going?
Upstairs to pack. Yes, who is it?
It is I. May I come in?
Yes, of course, Father. Well, what is it?
I'm not sure what I came to say, Ellie.
Well, if it's to ask me to change my mind, I won't.
You're too much of your father's daughter to do that. Changing one's mind comes hard to an Apley. It's almost impossible.
I'm sorry, Father.
I wonder if you realize how deeply you shocked me by this action.
I see no point in discussing it, Father. I think I'm entitled to some happiness, too.
Do you think we're meant to be happy?
Yes, I do.
What if happiness conflicts with duty?
Do you have any idea at all what you've done to your children? There was John's little puppy love affair. He was happy. He could have learned by it and outgrown it. But no, the girl came from the wrong place and she had the wrong name. And she wasn't suitable to Aunt Amelia or any of the other Apleys, living, dead, or in between. So John's little love affair had to be drowned like a stray kitten.
I only tried to do my duty as I saw it.
And then there was Howard Boulder. Not Harvard, not Boston, no money, no old family. He wears the wrong clothes and he thinks the wrong things and he has the courage to say what he thinks. He's alive, and that's what you can't stand. So my little love affair was another stray kitten to be drowned.
Ellie.
And so ingeniously. Just take his job away from him, and that's the last you'll see of him. Well, maybe it is. And maybe it's the last you're going to see of me, too.
I never intended to hurt you.
You couldn't anymore.
It seems I've hurt myself more than I've hurt anybody else. You fought back, but I have no more weapons to fight with. I feel lost. I hardly know who I am or where I belong.
Father...
Please, Ellie.
Father... Oh, Father...
Being an Apley is more of a burden than I realized.
But it's your whole life, isn't it?
I have nothing else.
I won't leave, Father.
Oh, tea's ready, dear.
Oh, yes, of course. I had a talk with Eleanor.
Oh, not another quarrel?
No, dear. Well, yes and no. It did begin. She told me that she is not going to run off and marry Boulder.
What, George? She was never thinking of eloping.
It's a word I dislike extremely, but I'm afraid that's what she was planning. Catherine, do you remember a red-headed girl named Mary Monahan? The one who...
The one that you,
I remember how I felt when Father stepped in, put his foot down. Then there was that Englishman, Writer, I think. The one you met after our marriage had been arranged.
Derek Sands.
It would have been a little more tactful if you'd pretended to have forgotten. Excuse me, dear. There's a man I want to speak to at the club. You might ask Eleanor down to tea with you. She's been through quite a lot today.
Mr. Howard Boulder, sir.
Oh, Mr. Boulder. Glad you could come.
Mr. Apley?
You know Dean Ringwood, I'm sure.
Yes, of course. He fired me, but only under duress, I'm sure.
This is Mr. Loring.
How do you do, sir?
Oh, how do, sir? Nice to meet you after... it's charming.
Won't you sit down?
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Loring and I have prepared a statement for the newspapers, Dr. Boulder. I felt that all the principals in this business should hear it, make sure that the text is satisfactory. That's why I invited you here. Will you read it, please, Buzzy?
Me? Oh, all right, all right. My friend, Mr. George Apley, and I wish to make public acknowledgement of an error in judgment. Oh, it's rather strong, that, don't
May
you
as
think,
well
Oliver?
admit it. There's no way of getting round it.
Huh? Oh, well. When we heard one of Dr. Boulder's lectures and found ourselves unalterably opposed to his interpretation of the Concord group, we did not consider the broader issue of...
Academic freedom.
Oh, yes, the broader issue of academic freedom. Since then, we have had occasion to examine this, oh, you read it, old boy, I can't make out your writing.
Since then, we have had occasion to examine this aspect of the matter. While we still disagree with many of Dr. Boulder's views, we now feel that it is his right to hold and to state them. That in the words of Emerson, he must speak the very truth as his life and conscience teach it. Therefore, as trustee of the Jonathan Smythe Fellowship, I am requesting Harvard College to reinstate Dr. Boulder immediately. Signed, Bosworth Loring.
Splendid, Mr. Loring. You've done a very courageous thing. And you too, Mr. Apley. A clear, concise, dignified statement.
Well, must be running along. Good night, Dean. Doctor, good night, George. That'll be the end of this nasty mess, I hope.
I must be going too, Mr. Apley. Can't thank you enough, sir. Good night.
Good night, Professor.
Good night, Boulder. Drop in at my office in the morning, will you?
Yes, sir.
I must say you've acted very handsomely about the whole thing, sir.
Well, if a man has a mind of his own, it's his privilege to change it.
Say, that's very good. Not Emerson.
No, you flatter me.
Well, don't go, Mr. Boulder.
We're not intruding, George.
No, dear.
Come in, Ellie.
Didn't you get my message? I told you.
Ellie, I invited him here. I sent for you, too. He is to be reinstated as Jonathan Smythe lecturer.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, thank you, Father.
I've learned several things, Ellie. You showed me my reflection in a most unflattering mirror. And you taught me a lesson in tolerance and loyalty. You said you wished you could have my blessing. Well, my dear, you have it.
Thank you, Father. Oh, Mother.
Mr. Boulder, why don't you take Ellie into the conservatory and show her the camellias?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, Catherine, I feel singularly happy. I don't like that sign. But it does let people know there's no place for codfish like Boston.